Harry's Wife, part 100.29. The media is waiting to expose her. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Harry's wife regularly courted the media and continues to do so through the PR agencies throwing money to advance her PR propaganda through puff pieces, the likes of People.com, Tatler, Harper's Bazaar, and, of course, Hello. This is all done, of course, as part of her need to assert control. The problem she's got is that she really got in the face of the media, particularly in the United Kingdom, with the court case against Associated Newspapers Limited. And the repeated potshots that she's taken at the media, most recently the further mistruth about alleging that the media would somehow use the N-word in relation to her children, which is a blatant fallacy. The media sit and wait. Somebody like Harry's wife is an individual that has so many skeletons in various closets. Why? Well, like all narcissists of her ilk, the lesser ones and the mid-range ones, their narcissism works, as I've explained before, brilliantly in the moment. It achieves that control through one of the three assertions. In other instances, it will also obtain fuel, and sometimes character traits and residual benefits. And the narcissism is very good at getting those things. The problem for lesser and mid-range narcissists, of course, is the law of collateral consequences, which means that their narcissism is only focused on the now without thinking of the fallout, the consequences, the residual impact of what they're doing. A simple example of this is a middle lesser narcissist who turns up at work, and it's the fourth day that week he's turned up late, demonstrating a lack of accountability, absence of emotional empathy, poor boundary recognition, and of course a sense of entitlement. His manager says to him, "You're now on a disciplinary. Challenge fuel, threat to control." His narcissism steps in and, since he's a middle lesser, causes him to use physical violence. He punches that manager. He puts the manager on his backside. He's got control, he's gained fuel. The narcissism has done its job. But then we're on to the next moment. Not that the narcissism cared about that, but in the next moment what then occurs is the manager says, "You're fired." That middle lesser loses his job. There's the collateral consequence. He doesn't then think, "Oh shit, I shouldn't have done that." He deals with that further threat to control by saying, "F you, didn't want the job anyway." Dismissiveness, and storms out. But he's lost his job. There's the collateral consequence. He then has the potential that he might be investigated for a physical assault and potentially convicted of that. And similarly, with Harry's wife, all through her life, her narcissism has managed to get her the prime aims, but there's a price to pay. Friendships broken, family members ostracised, allegations of gluing people's eyes shut, allegations of being a yacht girl, suggestions of a pregnancy when she was in Argentina and that she has had a child already, suggestions that she was married before Trevor Engelson. The fact is, somebody like Harry's wife repeatedly causes those collateral consequences. We've seen them with regard to the fact that she tells lies which are then easily disproved. We've seen it with regard to the fact that she's been accused of bullying, that she was accused of making Princess Charlotte cry, that she was accused of being high-handed towards staff, that there are various allegations and rumours with regard to ongoing behaviours that are pissing off her neighbours in Monty Shit Show. Wherever she goes, she's governed by her narcissism when it comes to interacting with other people. And that means that she will always, because she's a mid-range narcissist, create collateral consequences. Sometimes the narcissism at the later juncture acts to hush this up, or more often, where you get a wealthy narcissist, they have a team that runs around firefighting for them, trying to get things removed from the internet. Remember, of course, where those influence was brought to bear against CNN to prevent them reporting upon the various contradictions that had arisen with regard to her behaviours. The fact that the shit show of the interview involving Oprah can no longer be found, although that may be more to do with Oprah's embarrassment at having all of the forensic ability of a piece of wilted lettuce. Nevertheless, Harry's wife repeatedly causes fuck-ups, faux pas and problems because she's a mid-range narcissist. Some narcissists don't have the ability to do anything about it, other than ignore and dismiss and continue on their chaotic way. With Harry's wife, as a consequence of having money, and people invested, of course, whose jobs depend upon her continuing to draw people in, she has the PR people, the publicists, the firefighters running around, cleaning up the mess that she engages in. But all of this means that there's a trail of evidence. All of this means that there are those incidents which have taken place. There are the rumours. There's a speculation. Some of them are outlandish and ridiculous, but others have clear substance. And the fact is, if anybody's going to know about it, it's journalists. Delving into the dark recesses of human behaviour, slithering into the cracks in the way that people behave, going into those murky areas that other people might not want to do so, all in pursuit of the story. Journalists are the ones that dig up the dirt. It's what they're trained for. It's what brings clicks and views. And therefore, they will have found, because there's an absolute plethora of collateral consequences strewn throughout her history, they will have been found. Tom Bower found some of these, of course, in his recent book of revenge, and he undoubtedly will have found more, but decided to avoid the risk of litigation by only sticking with those things which were ironclad when it came to defending a claim of defamation. But he will have further evidence. Other journalists will have further evidence. Now, why haven't they moved upon this already? Well, as I've just touched upon, in some instances, it could be seen as contentious, and therefore there would be a reluctance to move on it for fear of litigation. There's also, of course, as Tom Bower explained, many people were actually reluctant to speak to him, and indeed those that did so on condition of anonymity. Where you have a rumour that's been confirmed but somebody won't provide you with a statement, that's going to cause you to be unstuck in a courtroom. You need that person to back up what they're saying. And therefore, it's likely that there will be repeated reports of arguments with Prince Harry, heard by staff, heard by hoteliers, heard by people over the garden wall. More people will start to speak out, emboldened, as I've explained, by the turning of the tide, and less fearful of repercussions compared to the situation that Tom Bower found when he was interviewing people. It's undoubtedly the case the contents of the bullying report have already been leaked and have found their ways into the press, but they're not using them. Neighbours will comment upon what's been going on. And it started, of course, with journalists. We've seen the piss take that was the cut, which Harry's wife hasn't realised as a consequence of her self-absorption and low cognitive function, really highlighted what a ridiculous individual she was. The point is, the media have got the evidence. They've got the rumours, they've got the incidents, and they will have clear evidence of it. So why haven't they moved out on it before? Quite simply, out of respect to the Queen. The Queen wanted to keep things together. She didn't want to lose her grandson. She wanted to be seen to maintain the welcome that was afforded to Harry's wife, and was prepared to hold her nose with regard to the allegations and rumours, and undoubtedly a dossier of material that's presented to her in relation to Harry's wife. Whilst the Queen will have had reservations about her joining the royal family, bowed as a consequence of some form of leverage that occurred, perhaps the suggestion that she was pregnant, and Prince Harry's demands that he be allowed to marry her, the Queen acquiesced. And notwithstanding knowledge that there was plenty of skeletons in the closet, and the press will have known about this, the press, out of respect to Her Majesty and the royal family more generally, decided to keep stum. The press does this with certain people. There are certain individuals who there's a lot of material known about, but they're viewed as a bit of a golden person by the public, so the press won't touch them because they don't want the backlash associated with that. Gary Lineker is one such person, although his recent loviness and champagne socialism may perhaps have caused that to erode somewhat. But nevertheless, there are people, public figures, who have got the skeletons in the closet, but the press leave them alone because they're viewed as a national treasure or a bit of a golden individual, and they're savvy enough to realise that there's no point going after this person because the public won't buy it, and indeed, in many instances, the public will still give them a pass because they're so well loved. Here, the media have the evidence. They know about the skeletons in the closets, but chose not to act on them previously out of respect to the elderly monarch, given her advanced age, the status that she affords, and the Platinum Jubilee coming up. But they're not going to hold on forever. Like the door of a castle being repeatedly struck with a battering ram, eventually it will give, and so will the media's tolerance. Eventually, perhaps even with a nod from the palace, there will be a tsunami of disclosures about Harry's wife to expose her. She, of course, doesn't sit there worrying about this. Her narcissism doesn't cause her to do so. But it follows like this. She is a mid-range narcissist, and a highly prominent one. Like any mid-range narcissist, there will have been repeated collateral consequences. For many mid-range narcissists, this isn't such a huge problem because they're not famous or prominent. Nobody's really interested in Joe Bloggs from Brixham. Or Mary Sue hanging out in Oklahoma. However, occasionally, there are those narcissists that are mid-range in nature with their collateral consequences who clamber up in terms of fame and wealth. Harry's wife is one such individual. She has all of these collateral consequences, which people can find, people can dig the dirt on, and obtain the evidence. And the press will have it by the shitload. They've kept hold of it so far, but they will be ready to unleash it. They will do so as they recognise the tide is turning. They will do so when they gauge that it would not cause a problem for the royal family. Perhaps, should the Queen be moved to organise the stripping of the titles through Parliament, then perhaps the exposure will start. I anticipate that there will be a little bit of a drip feeding of it to begin with, building up the pressure, pointing out some of the behaviours that are spoken about as more and more people turn on her. And then, with the general public being against her, being the case more internationally, the press, which has a rather long memory when it comes to people like Harry's wife, will unleash all of the evidence which she created. She, of course, won't accept it, denies it, rejects it, deflects it, her narcissism working overtime to nullify the threat to control. But the point of its release isn't to persuade her of what she's done, it's to let everybody else know about her behaviours. And that is what they will ultimately do. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.